good. This excerpt is from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Says, you don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I don't know what the fuck I'm reading, but that ain't no matter. The book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, and he told the truth mainly. There was things which he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. What? Do y'all know what the fuck I just said? Maybe. If y'all got it, then cool. I don't know what the hell. Okay. Anyways, as we were, Dustfinger and Farad were waiting for them in the parking lot when they left the hotel. Over the nearby hills, a warm wind was slowly driving clouds toward the sea. Everything seemed gray today, even the houses with their brightly color-washed walls and flowering shrubs in the streets. Mo took the coastal road, which Eleanor had said was built by the Romans, and followed it farther west. All through the drive, the sea lay to their left, its water stretching to the horizon. Sometimes hidden by houses, sometimes by trees, but this morning it didn't look half as inviting as it had on the day Maggie had come down from the mountains with Eleanor and Dustfinger. The gray of the sky cast a dull reflection on the blue waves, and the sea spray foamed like dirty dishwater. Several times Maggie found her gaze wandering to the hills on her right. Capricorn's village was hidden somewhere among them. Once she even thought she saw its pale church tower in a dark fold of the hills, and her heart beat faster, though she knew it couldn't possibly be Capricorn's church. Her feet remembered all too well how long that endless journey down the mountainside had been. Mo was driving faster than usual, much faster. Obviously, he could hardly wait to reach their destination. After a good hour, they turned off the coast road and followed a narrow, winding lane through a valley gray with buildings. Greenhouses covered the hills here, their panes painted white for protection against the sun that was now hidden behind clouds. Only when the road went uphill did the country on both sides turn green again. The buildings gave way to natural meadowland, and stunted olive trees lined the road, which forked unexpectedly a couple of times. Mo had to keep consulting the map he had bought, but finally the right name appeared on the sign. They drove into a small village, little more than a square, a few dozen houses, and a church that looked very much like Capricorn's. When Maggie got out of the car, she saw the sea far below. The waves were so rough on this overcast day that even from the distance she could see the breakers. Rude. Mo had parked in the village square beside the memorial for the dead of the two world wars. The list of names was long for such a small place. Maggie thought there were almost as many names as the village had houses. You can leave the car unlocked. I'll keep an eye on it, said Dustfinger as Mo was about to lock up. I keep getting lost. He threw his pack over his shoulder, put the sleepy Gwen on his chain, and sat on the steps in front of the war memorial. Farad sat down beside him without a word. Maggie looked uneasily at them both as she followed Mo. Remember you promised not to mention me, Dustfinger called after them. Yes, all right, replied Mo. Farad was playing with matches again. Maggie caught him at it when she looked around once more. By now, he could extinguish the burning matches with his mouth quite well, but all the same, Dustfinger took the box of matches away from him, and Farad looked sadly at his empty hands. Maggie had met many people who loved books, sold them, collected them, printed them, or, like her father, prevented them from falling apart. But she had never before met anyone who wrote the words that filled a book's pages. She didn't even know the names of the authors of some of her favorite stories, let alone what they looked like. She had seen only the characters who emerged from the words to meet her, never the writer who made them up. It was just as Mo said. In general, one thought of writers as dead or very, very old. But the man who opened the door to them after Mo had rung the bell twice was neither. That is, he was certainly quite old, at least in Maggie's eyes, in his mid-60s or even older. His face was wrinkled like a turtle's, but his hair was black, without a trace of gray. She was to find out later that he dyed it. and he didn't look at all fragile. On the contrary, he planted himself so impressively in the doorway that Maggie was instantly tongue-tied. Luckily, Mo was not. "Signor Fignolio?" he asked. "Finoglio." Fignolio? Is that anyone? Yes, the face looked less forthcoming than ever. There was disapproval in every line of it, but Mo seemed undaunted. "I'm Mortimer Folkart." Why are their names so hard? Pippo? Fuck. Oh my fucking fuck. "I'm Mo." He introduced himself. "And this is my daughter Maggie. I'm here about one of your books." A boy appeared at the door beside Finoglio, and a little boy of about 5 and a small girl joined them on the other side of the doorway. She stared curiously first at Mo, then at Maggie. "Pippo's picked the chocolate chips out of the cake," Maggie heard her whisper as she looked anxiously at Mo. When his eyes twinkled at her, she disappeared behind Finoglio's back, giggling, but Finoglio himself still looked anything but friendly. "All the chocolate chips?" he growled. "Very well, I'm coming. You go and tell Pippo he's in very serious trouble." The little girl nodded and ran away, obviously happy to be the bearer of bad news. The boy clung to Finoglio's leg. "A very particular book," Mo went on. "Inkheart." Where did I go? "You wrote it quite a long time ago, and unfortunately I can't buy a copy anywhere now." With the man's icy stare still resting on her father, Maggie could only marvel that the words didn't freeze on Mo's lips. "Oh yes, so?" Finoglio crossed his arms. The girl appeared on his left again. "Pippo's hiding," she said. "That won't do him any good," said Finoglio. "I can always find him." The little girl scurried off again. Maggie heard her in the house, calling to the chocolate thief. Finoglio, however, turned back to Mo. "So what do you want? If you're planning to ask me clever questions of some kind about the book, forget it. I don't have time for that sort of thing. Anyway, as you said yourself, I wrote it ages ago." "No, there's only one question I was going to ask. I'd like to know if you still have any copies, and if I may buy one from you." The old man's expression was no longer quite so forbidding as he inspected Mo. "How extraordinary. You must be really keen on the book," he murmured. "I'm flattered. Although," he added, and his face darkened again, "I hope you're not one of those idiots who collect rare books just because they're rare, are you?" Mo couldn't help smiling. "No," he said. "I want to read it, that's all. I just want to read it." Finoglio braced an arm against the doorframe and looked at the house opposite as if he feared it might collapse at any moment. The street where he lived was so narrow that Mo could have touched both sides at once if he stretched out his arms. Many of the houses were built of coarse blocks of sandy gray stone, like the houses in Capricorn's village. But here there were flowers in window boxes and pots of plants on the steps, and many of the shutters looked as if they had been freshly painted. There was a baby carriage outside one house, a moped? I feel like I mean moped. But it doesn't have like a dash or nothing. Okay, there was a baby carriage outside one house and a moped leaning against the wall of another. And voices floated into the street from open windows. Capricorn's village probably looked like this one once, thought Maggie. An old woman passing by looked suspiciously at the strangers. Finoglio nodded to her, murmured a brief greeting, and waited until she had vanished behind a green-painted front door. "Inkheart," he said. "That really is a long time ago. And it's odd that you should be asking about that one of all my books." The girl came back. She tugged Finoglio's sleeve, and he whispered something in his ear. Finoglio's turtle face twisted in a smile. Maggie liked him better that way. "Oh, that's where he always hides, Paula," he told the little girl softly. "Perhaps you should advise him to try a better hiding place." Paula ran off for the third time, but not before gazing curiously at Maggie first. "Well, you'd better come in," said Finoglio. Without another word, he showed Mo and Maggie into the house, went down a dark, narrow hallway ahead of them, limping because The little boy was still clinging to his leg like a monkey, and he pushed open the door to the kitchen where the ruins of a cake stood on the table. Its brown icing was full of holes as the binding of a book when bookworms have been gnawing at it for years. Pippo, Finoglio bellowed so loudly that even Maggie jumped, although she didn't feel guilty of any naughtiness. I know you can hear me, and I warn you, I shall tie a knot in your nose for every hole in this cake. Do you understand? Maggie heard a giggle. It seemed to come from the cupboard next to the fridge. Finoglio broke a piece off the cake with the holes in it. Paula, he said, give this girl a slice if she doesn't mind the missing chocolate. Paula emerged from under the table and looked inquiringly at Maggie. I don't mind, said Maggie, whereupon Paula took a huge knife, cut an enormous piece of cake, and put it on the table in front of her. Pippo, let's have one of those rose-patterned plates, said Finoglio, and a hand stuck out of the cupboard holding a plate and its chocolate-brown fingers. Maggie was quick to take the plate before it dropped and put the piece of cake on it. What about you? Finoglio asked Mo. I'd prefer the book, said Mo. He was looking rather pale. Finoglio removed the little boy from his leg and sat down. Oh, my eye is so dry. Ow! My contact was like stuck. It's fused to my pupil. Go and find another tree to climb, Rico, he said. Then he looked thoughtfully at Mo. I'm afraid I can't help you, he said. I don't have a single copy left. They were stolen, all of them. And I lent them to an exhibition of old children's books in Genoa, a lavishly illustrated special edition, a copy with a signed dedication by the illustrator, and the 2 copies that belonged to my own children with all their scribbled comments. I always asked them to mark the bits they liked best. And finally, my own personal copy, every last one of them stolen 2 days after the exhibition opened. Mo ran a hand over his face as if he could wipe the disappointment off of it. Stolen, he said, of course. Of course, Finoglio narrowed his eyes and looked at Mo with great curiosity. My leg's asleep. I don't know what the fuck. How am I supposed to sit then? Come back, blood. Okay. You'll have to explain. In fact, I'm not letting you out of my house until I find out why you're interested in this of all my books. In fact, I might set the children on you, and you wouldn't like that. Mo tried for a smile without much success. My copy was stolen as well, he said at last, and that was a very special edition, too. Extraordinary. Finoglio raised his eyebrows, which were like hairy caterpillars creeping above his eyes. Come on, let's hear your story. All the hostility had vanished from his face. Curiosity, pure curiosity, had won out. In Finoglio's eyes, Maggie saw the same insatiable hunger for a good news story that overcame her at the sight of a new and exciting book. There's not much to tell, said Mo. Maggie heard in his voice that he didn't intend to tell the old man the truth. I restore books. That's how I make my living. I found yours in a secondhand bookstore some years ago, and I was going to give it a new binding and then sell it. But I liked it so much I kept it instead. And now it's been stolen, and I've been trying in vain to buy another copy. A friend who knows a great deal about rare books and how to get a hold of them finally suggested I might try the author himself. She was the person who found me your address, so I came here. Finoglio wiped a few cake crumbs off the table. Fine, he said, but that's not the whole story. What do you mean? The old man scrutinized Mo's face until he turned his head away and looked out of the narrow kitchen window. I mean, I can smell a good story miles away, so don't try keeping one away from me. Out with it. And then you two can have a piece of this magnificently perforated cake. Paula clambered up onto Finoglio's lap, nestled her head under his chin, and looked at Mo as expectantly as the old man himself had. But Mo shook his head. No, I think I'd better say no more. You wouldn't believe a word of it anyway. Oh, I'd believe all manner of things, Finoglio assured Mo, cutting him a slice of cake. I'd believe any story at all, just so long as it's well told. The cupboard door opened a crack, and Maggie saw a boy's head emerge. What about my punishment? He asked. Judging by his fingers, which were sticky with chocolate, this must be Pippo. What? Ridiculous. Where are we at? Later, said Finoglio. I have something else to do now. Disappointed, Pippo came out of the cupboard. Said you were going to tie knots in my nose. Double knots, semen knots, butterfly knots, any knots you fancy, but I have to hear this story first. So go and fool around with something else. Time for you. Pippo's really out here wanting to get punished. What the hell? Pippo stuck his lower lip out sulkily and disappeared into the corridor. Rico, the little boy, ran after him. Mo remained silent, pushing cake crumbs off the rough tabletop, drawing invisible patterns on the wood with his forefinger. There's someone in this story, and I've promised not to tell you about him, he said at last. Keeping a bad promise makes it no better, said Finoglio. Sleepy. Or at least so a favorite book of mine says. I don't know if it was a bad promise, Mo sighed, and looked up at the ceilings as if an answer might be found there. Very well, he said, I'll tell you, but Dustfinger will murder me if he finds out. Dustfinger? I once called a character that. Oh yes, of course, the poor trickster in Inkheart. I killed him off in the last chapter but one. Y'all hear that? A very touching scene. I cried tears while I was writing it. Maggie almost choked on a piece of cake she had just put in her mouth, but Finoglio went on calmly. I haven't killed off many characters, but sometimes it just happens. Death scenes aren't easy to write. They can too easily get sentimental, but I thought I did pretty well with Dustfinger's death. Horrified, Maggie looked at Mo. He dies? Did you know that? Yes, of course. I've read the whole story, Maggie. But why didn't you tell him? He didn't want to know. Finoglio was following this exchange with a puzzled look on his face, and with great curiosity. Who kills him? Asked Maggie. Basta? Ah, Basta, Finoglio smiled. Each one of his separate wrinkles expressed self-satisfaction. One of the best villains I ever thought up. A rabid dog, but not half as bad as my other dark hero, Capricorn. Basta would have let his heart be torn out for Capricorn, but his master is a stranger to such loyalty. He feels nothing at all. He doesn't even enjoy his own cruelty. Yes, I really did think up some pretty dark characters for Inkheart. But then there's the Shadow, Capricorn's hound, as I always called him to myself. Though, of course, that's far too friendly a name for such a monster. The Shadow, Maggie's... God, I can't talk. The Shadow, Maggie's voice was hardly more than a whisper. Does he kill Dustfinger? No, I'm sorry, I'd quite forgotten your question. Once I begin talking about my characters, it's hard to stop me. No one of Capricorn's men kills Dustfinger. It was a very successful scene. Dustfinger has some kind of tame marten. Capricorn's man wants to kill it because he enjoys killing small animals, so Dustfinger tries to save his furry friend and dies in the attempt. Maggie said nothing. Poor Dustfinger, she thought. Poor Dustfinger. She couldn't think of anything else. Which of Capricorn's men does it? She asked. Flatnose or Cockerel? Finoglio looked at her in surprise. Well, fancy that. You know all their names. I usually forget them soon after I've made them up. It's neither of them, Maggie, said Mo. The murderer's name isn't even mentioned in the book. A whole pack of Capricorn's men is hunting Gwen, and one of them draws a knife and uses it. A man who's probably still waiting for Dustfinger. Waiting for him? Finoglio looked at Mo, confused. That's terrible, whispered Maggie. I'm glad I didn't read any more. What do you mean? Are you talking about my book? Finoglio's voice sounded hurt. Yes, said Maggie, I am. She looked at Mo, a question in her eyes. And Capricorn, who kills him? No one. No one? Maggie stared at Finoglio. I read that wrong. Who kills him? No one. No one? Maggie stared at Finoglio so accusingly that he rubbed his nose awkwardly. It was an impressive nose. Why are you looking at me like that? He cried. Yes, I let him get away with it. He's one of my best villains. How could I kill him off? It's the same in real life. Notorious murderers get off scot-free and live happily all their lives, while good people die. Sometimes the very best people. That's the way of the world. Why should it be any different in books? What about Basta? Does he stay alive too? Maggie remembered what Ferret had said back at the ruined hovel. Why not kill them? That's what they were going to do to us. Basta stays alive too, replied Finoglio. I remember toying for some time with the idea of writing a sequel to Inkheart, and I didn't want to do it without those two. I was proud of them. And the Shadow was quite a success too. Yes, he really was, but I'm always most attached to my human characters. You know, if they were to ask me which of those two I was prouder of, Basta or Capricorn, I couldn't tell you, even though some critics said they were just too nasty. Mo stared out of the window again. Then he looked at Finoglio. Wouldn't you like to meet them? He asked. Or would you like to meet them? He asked. Meet who? Finoglio looked at him in surprise. Capricorn and Basta. Good God, no. Finoglio laughed so loud that Paula, quite frightened, put her hand over his mouth. Well, we did, said Mo wearily. Meggie and I and Dustfinger. We on a new chapter? Omakuna? Are you new? Welcome in, maybe. Omakuna. What does that mean? The first one. Hey, we got ratings, guys. Welcome in. I'm in the middle of reading, so not a whole lot going on here. We're reading Inkheart. But we're in a new chapter. Thanks for rating. I don't know how to say the name. Omakuna. This looks kind of weird. This one's from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn too. This little foreshadowing piece says, persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. By order of the author, per GG Chief of Ordnance. I got hiccups again. What the hell? What's up, Mert? Alright, chapter 25, page 260. How long is this one? Oh, this one's not long at all. Finoglio said nothing for a long time after Mo had finished his story. Paula had gone off long ago in search of Pippo and Rico. What did I do over here? I fucked up my chat. Meggie heard them running over the wooden floorboards above them, back and forth, jumping, sliding, giggling, and squealing. But in Finoglio's kitchen, it was so quiet you could hear the tick of a clock on the wall by the window. Does he have those scars on his face? I expect you know what I mean. The fairies treated the cuts. That's why there were only slight scars left, little more than 3 pale lines on his skin. Is that right? Finoglio looked inquiringly at Mo, who nodded. The door flew open. Is it, like, too bright in here now? I guess it's not if I stay, like, way back here. If I get too, like, by the fucking door, I turn into a glowing white beacon. We're probably good. So it just, like, skipped him telling the story? No, don't start yawning. Finoglio looked out of the window again, brushing a few crumbs off of his pants. Basta scarred him, he said. They both fancied the same girl. Mo nodded. Yes, I know. A window was open in the house opposite, and you could hear a woman scolding a child inside. I suppose I ought to feel very, very proud, murmured Finoglio. Every writer wants to create lifelike characters, and mine are so lifelike they've walked straight off the page. That's because my father read them out of the book, said Maggie. He can do it with other books, too. Yes, of course, Finoglio nodded. A good thing you reminded me. Otherwise, I might start taking myself for a minor god, mightn't I? But I'm sorry about your mother, although depending on how you might look at it, that wasn't really my fault. It's worse for my father, said Maggie. I don't remember her. Mo looked at her, startled. Of course not. You were younger than my grandchildren, said Finoglio thoughtfully. I'd really like to see him, he added. Dustfinger, I mean. Naturally, I'm sorry now that I thought up such an unhappy ending for the poor fellow, but it somehow seemed right for him. As Shakespeare put it so well, everybody plays his part, and mine is a sad one. He looked out into the street. Something fell and broke on the floor above them, but Finoglio didn't seem particularly interested. Are those your children? Asked Maggie, pointing up at the ceiling. Heaven help us, no, my grandchildren. One of my daughters lives in the village, too. They're always visiting me, and I tell them stories. I tell half the village stories, but I don't feel like writing them down anymore. He turned to Mo with an inquiring look. Where is he now? Dustfinger, I can't tell you. He doesn't want to see you. He got quite a shock when my father told him about you, added Maggie, but Dustfinger must be told what happens to him, she thought. He must. Then he'll understand why he really can't go back. And all the same, she thought next, he'll really still be homesick. Homesick forever. I must see him only once. Don't you understand? Finoglio looked pleadingly at Mo. I could just follow you, inconspicuously. How would he know who I am? I want to find out if he really looks the way I imagined him, that's all. However, Mo shook his head. I think you'd better leave him alone. Nonsense. Surely I can see him whenever I like. After all, I invented him. And you killed him off, Maggie pointed out. Well, Finoglio raised his hand helplessly. I want to make the story more exciting. Don't you like exciting stories? Only if they have happy endings. Happy endings, Finoglio snorted scornfully and then listened to what was going on upstairs. Something or someone had landed heavily on the wooden floorboards. Loud howls followed the thud. Finoglio strode to the door. Wait here, I'll be back in a minute, he called, disappearing into the corridor. Mo, whispered Maggie, you've got to tell Dustfinger. You've got to tell him he can't go back. But Mo shook his head. He won't want to listen, I promise you. I've tried more than a dozen times. Perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring him together with Finoglio after all. He might well be more likely to believe his creator than me. With a sigh, he brushed a few cake crumbs off Finoglio's kitchen table. There was a picture in Inkheart, he murmured, raising the palm of his hand over the tabletop as if to conjure up a picture himself. It showed a group of women standing under an arched gateway in splendid clothes as if they were going to a party. One of them had hair as fair as your mother's. You can't see the woman's face in the picture. She has her back turned, but I always imagined it was her. Crazy, isn't it? Where'd I go? Maggie placed her hand on his. Mo, promise you won't go back to the village, she said. Please, promise me you won't try to get the book back. The second hand on Finoglio's kitchen clock was dividing time into painfully small segments. At last, Mo answered. I promise, he said. Look at me and say it. He did. I promise, he repeated. There's just one more thing I want to discuss with Finoglio, and then we'll go home and forget about the book. Happy now? Maggie nodded, although she wondered what else there could be to discuss. Finoglio returned with a tearful Pippo on his back. The other two children followed their grandfather, looking crestfallen. Holes in the cake, and now a dent in his forehead, too. I think I ought to send all of you home. Finoglio told them crossly as he put Pippo down on a chair. Then he rummaged around in the big cupboard until he found a Band-Aid, which he stuck none too gently on his grandson's cut forehead. Mo pushed his chair back and stood up. I've changed my mind, he said. I'll take you to Dustfinger after all. Finoglio turned to him in surprise. Perhaps you can make it clear to him once and for all that he can't go back, Mo continued. Goodness knows what he might do next. I'm afraid it could be dangerous for him, and I do have this idea, rather a weird idea, but I'd like to talk to you about it. Weirder than what I've already heard? I'd say that's hardly possible. Finoglio's grandchildren had disappeared into the cupboard again. Giggling, they closed the doors. "Very well, I'll listen to your idea," said Finoglio, "but I want to see Dustfinger first." Mo looked at Maggie. It wasn't often that he broke a promise, and he clearly felt far from comfortable about it. Maggie could understand that only too well. "He's waiting in the square," said Mo hesitantly, "but let me talk to him first." "In the square here?" Finoglio's eyes widened. "That's wonderful." With one stride, he was standing in front of the little mirror hanging next to the kitchen door, running his fingers through his black hair, almost as if he were afraid Dustfinger might be disappointed by his creator's appearance. "I'll pretend I don't see him until you call me," he said. "Yes, that's the thing to do." There was a clattering in the cupboard, and Pippo stumbled out in a jacket that came down to his ankles, and a hat so large it slipped right over his eyes. Of course, Finoglio took the hat off Pippo's head and put it on his own. "That's it, I'll take the children with me. A grandfather with his 3 children. Nothing about that sight to make anyone uneasy, is there?" Mo just nodded and pushed Maggie out into the hallway. As they walked down the street, leading back to the square in their car, Finoglio followed a few meters behind them, with his grandchildren running and jumping around him like 3 puppies. Hi, everybody!